The Saucony Ride 15 is Saucony's version of a daily trainer. That workhorse in your rotation that whether you knew what the plan was for the day or not, you could lace them up and head out on your run. After over 200 miles, my goal is to answer that question. This is my full review for the Saucony Ride 15.
Hi everybody and welcome to the video. My name is Matt and this is What Matters to Matt, and yes, today I want to talk about the Saucony Ride 15. Now, it has been a while since I did my initial review. I'll put a link to it up there. A lot has changed since I did that review, and I wanted to make sure before I did sort of a full review that I got plenty of miles in this shoe. Not a ton, there are definitely a whole lot more miles in it, but I do have a little bit over 200 miles. And the other thing was that I wanted to make sure that I took it on a long run, which you just saw before I started this clip. Was the long run that I went on this past weekend. I ended up being just a little bit over 30 kilometers, 3 hours and 15 minutes. And to be honest with you, before I went on that run, I was a little bit nervous about whether I was going to be able to even do a long run. I was thinking it was either going to be 5K or 30K, nothing in between. And mostly I was getting a few niggles in my knee, in my calf, in my hip, all on my right side. After Saturday, it was kind of a long day. On Saturday, I did a little bit of a marathon paced run in the morning of 13 kilometers. Then I went to the gym and did a back and biceps workout. Then I did a little bit of a 5K recovery run with my daughter. All that to say, Sunday morning, I was nervous about going on that long run, and especially with a shoe like this or this Ride 15. And we're going to talk about that as we get further into this review. Okay, so before we get into my opinion on the different parts of this shoe, I do just want to say I'm not going to go over the specs on this shoe. If you want to see the specs, best case scenario, you check out my video after you watch this video where I did my initial review on this shoe, or I'll put a link to the Saucony website in the description down below if you want to see those specs. Okay, so starting with that upper, there's a few things that have changed since I did that initial review on this upper for me. First thing I am going to say is that one thing that has stayed the same is that I consider this upper to be very comfortable and very breathable. What I mean by that, well, over the last number of weeks, it has been incredibly hot here. A lot of the world has been going through a bit of a heat wave, and this shoe has not been too warm. It's certainly not as breathable as something like a race shoe or even the Endorphin Speed or Endorphin Speed 2, which I have back on the shelves back there. But it is still fairly breathable given that it is a daily trainer and still holds a decent amount of padding. Now, on that padding that it does have and on that upper, I will say when I was on that long run the other day, this shoe took on quite a bit of water and held that water throughout my run, which really surprised me. And I was trying to think back on whether I'd been on any other runs where it was raining in this shoe, and I'm sure I have, but not to that extent. And I noticed during that long run, I really noticed the weight. In fact, it was enough that for the first time, I think in any shoe, I was really curious when I got home after that long run to immediately put it on the scale. And I think it came out to, I'll put the video on the screen here, but around 380 some grams, which I think the original video when I weighed my shoe, it was around 306 grams, so it carried a lot of extra weight. I know those numbers sound super huge to some of you out there, but keep in mind that I am weighing a men's US size 13 shoe, so a pretty big shoe to begin with, but it did take on quite a bit of extra weight in the water. The other thing that I'll mention about the upper that had me a little bit surprised about this shoe is that one of the things in my initial review, and one of the things that I'm usually pretty confident about when I get any Saucony shoe, is that lockdown. I always say that this upper kind of disappears on my foot. Wasn't really the case when I did that long run on the weekends, which was really surprising because initially it had done really well. What I did notice on my long run, by the time my shoe got wet, and I'm sure that had some to do with it, but my foot did shift around a little bit in the shoe. It wasn't enough for me to stop and relace the shoe. And to be fair, the next day after, I didn't have any blisters, anything like that. So it wasn't really that bad, but I did know a little bit more shifting than I like in the shoe, and my foot was just moving around overall a little bit more than I like. And I do also put a runner's knot in the back of this, and with those tabs, I thought I'd get a little bit better lockdown. But that's the upper, pretty good, decent amount of padding, nice tongue, very breathable, but took on a lot of water and a little bit of shifting on that long run. So the midsole for me has been a little bit of a surprise. When I first bought this shoe, and it's probably one of the biggest things that I was concerned about when it came to something like a long run or a recovery run, was that versus other daily trainers out there, whether it be something like a Rebel V2 or V3 that's going to be coming out, or the Nova Blast 3, Nova Blast 2, or even the Cumulus from Asics, a lot of those shoes are quite a bit softer, at least softer, than the Ride 15, and Rides traditionally have been a little bit firmer. One thing I will notice though was after about 50 miles, this shoe did soften up quite a bit. That is a good thing for the most part. Now I do have 200 miles in this shoe, and don't know, there, you will see there's a decent amount of creasing that's already happened when it comes to the midsole of this shoe. And I'm a little bit worried about whether it's going to flatten out early for me, or earlier than I'd want to, since I did actually have to break it in. Most shoes these days, I feel you don't really need to break it in. And originally, one of the things that really drew me to any of the Ride shoes was just that firm midsole. Had me thinking that it wasn't going to break down, but the fact that it did soften up rather quickly and kind of change the way it felt underfoot was good for those long runs, but has me worried just a little bit about what it's going to do for the long term. So the outsole for me, there is a decent amount of exposed midsole on this outsole, and that was one of the things I said in my initial review that I was a little bit worried about in this shoe, because previous rides had quite a bit more rubber. Now I do get why shoes do this. It does lighten them up, and do you actually need that much rubber? Probably not, but I always liked having a lot of rubber on the bottom of these shoes because I was going to be logging a ton of miles in them, and a lot of those miles are on things like crushed rock. So when I saw this much exposed midsole on the bottom of this shoe, I was worried about it getting a little bit chewed up. That hasn't been the case at all. It actually looks pretty good. Now the one spot that it did wear out on that exposed midsole is right here in the middle of the shoe, but I'm not concerned about that because there is quite a bit of rubber and quite a bit of tread on either side of that, so we're keeping the grip there. The only other spot that the outsole has actually worn on me at all is right here in the toe off, but that happens to a lot of my shoes. And keep in mind, again, we have a little bit over 200 miles or 330 or so kilometers on this shoe, so it's got about the amount of wear that I'd expect. And the heel, really not much wear at all. So overall, outsole has been holding up really well. I don't think I'm going to have any trouble going another 300, 400, or even 500 miles in this shoe with the amount of rubber that's still on the bottom of the Ride 15. So overall, guys, this shoe has been really good to me, and I have had the chance to take this on pretty well every run possible. I wanted this shoe to be a little bit of a tweener, and I've taken it on fartleks, thresholds, intervals, hill repeats, some easy light trail running, some recovery runs, and now some long runs, some longer miles, and it has held up really well and done everything that I expect out of this shoe. Is it the best at any one of those things? I'm going to say no, but it does pretty well at all of them. So it's great daily trainer for me, great value for your money. You can get this right now for $179.99 here in Canada. I'll put what it's up, at least on the Saucony website in the States. So in Canada right now, it's not on sale. It is a shoe from this year. Previous rides, definitely you can get them for a lot cheaper. But this has been a very solid shoe for me. I'm happy with my purchase. I'm not somebody that has a whole lot of extra money to throw into a giant shoe rotation, so I put a lot of thought into the shoes that I buy and the shoes that I review, and this has been a solid purchase for me. That's all I have to say about the shoe today, guys. My name is Matt, and this is What Matters to Matt, and ultimately what matters to me most is my family. I'll see you guys in the next video.
Step 1, wake up early, gonna rise with the sun. Step 2, get some good, some food in you. Step 3, think real hard about what you wanna be. Step 4, everybody just do your thing.
Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. Wake up, today's